Chapter 44. Product Launch. After that rather extreme test of the Omnibolt, Hurricane left in good spirits. He did tell them about a couple of problems before he left, though. One of them were the ship's inertial dampeners. They were still too weak, and the G-forces could get brutal when fully accelerating. There was also the noise the ship made. The Omnibolt was loud to begin with, but with the sonic boom it made as it broke the sound barrier. Well, let's just say you wouldn't want it passing by at a funeral. Ronin and Simons couldn't do much about the first issue, but the ship's noise was fixable. Fortunately, in spite of these two issues, Hurricane had still promised to fly their ship during his next upcoming race. So after Ronin and Simons shared a solid handshake for a job well done, Simons headed home, and Ronin hit the bed. They could fix the ship's noise problem later. Sleep did not come easy, though. Not today. Only after he swallowed down several painkillers did Ronin finally manage to drift off. He awoke to pain the next day as well. Apparently, meridians took a while to heal. His arms felt better than yesterday, but he sure wouldn't mind if he could speed up the process a little. Luckily, he knew of just the right thing. "Guess it can't be helped," he said to himself as he rose up. "It's about time I got in a good session anyways." It was time for the tried and trusted Calvracian embrace. If there was one thing that could heal him quickly, it was this. After doing a little stretching, he felt ready, then lowered his body into position. Ronin next progressed from the first stance to the 10th with little difficulty. He let out a deep breath. The 11th stance was where the struggle began. He held the position, then let the artifact energy fill his body. With his eyes closed, he attuned more deeply with the technique, feeling out the minute changes happening to him. Gathering himself, he then switched positions, locking in the 12th stance. The energy was more potent now, heavier, and he felt a tingling sensation as it moved. Flowing deeper into his organs, the energy entered anything from bone marrow to blood vessels. At least that's how he envisioned it. The meditative mindset that followed the technique required a form of inner visualization, and these images were what he felt helped best. What Ronin did not visualize, however, was the illusory plant life rising up around him. Most of the flora surrounding him consisted of plants he'd never seen before, be it online or in real life. He saw anything from thick, thorny stems, cupped by massive flowers, to green, glowing moss. With every new stance he made, he was met by something different. He moved on to the 13th stance, and the older flora around him turned more real. With his eyes still closed, he saw a tree grow before him. It grew fast, reaching adulthood in mere seconds, and long vines began to descend from its canopy. After some thought, Ronin had come to the conclusion that this technique, in a sense, was about life. The name, Calvracian Embrace, meant something, and though he did not know what the term Calvracian was about, the other half of the name was clear. He was embracing life itself. His spread arms, the positions of his legs, the angle at which his head was tilted. It was all an open welcome to the aspects of life, and as he embraced it, it in turn changed him. Ronin began to shake as the violent energy filled him. This was his limit, but with all the practice he'd put in over these last 3 weeks, he should be able to reach it. The 14th stance. His shaking transitioned into an agonized form of trembling as he felt the energy saturate the last remaining recess of his body. He slowly began to move, 1 centimeter at a time. Ronin now had to fight just to not fall over. Finally, as sweat poured down his skin, He squeezed out the last remaining distance, then locked the stance in. He collapsed to the ground. Good, he thought, satisfied. He was already beginning to feel better, though that might be the placebo effect. Either way, this technique was incredible, and with yesterday's test flight having proved that his infusion technique worked, Ronin's mind drifted over to the other two articles he'd bought. First, there was the article on willpower. It claimed that in order to awaken the talent, you needed the right genes. But there was more to it than that. Only under extreme conditions which pushed a person to his absolute limits, then beyond, was there a chance to awaken the ability. And a small chance at that. At the end of the day, this was not an ability which could be learned, only happened upon. Then there was the second article. Just as bizarre a talent as willpower, retrocognition was only awakened in individuals possessing extreme amounts of empathy. It required an absolute obsession for detail and a deep love for an object. Only then was it possible for a person to feel the object's past. The method was by no means foolproof either, involving a lot of guesswork. For example, when testing if someone had the talent, the person was first made to guess an object's past. Say, take a laser gun for instance. Where had it been? Was its previous location the factory it was made in, maybe? Had the object been buried underground before? Or perhaps it had been in the shopping center down the street. If it was found that the person tested was statistically more accurate with his guesses than the average man, he had the talent. Safe to say, due to how this ability was measured, this was a field rife with people pretending to have the gift, when in fact, they did not. Even the article repeatedly warned of how many fakes and liars there were out there. This was all useful information to Ronin. It might not directly relate to his condition, but he needed to know what people could do. He'd embarked upon an unknown path of power, and for all he knew, all of these abilities might be connected. And who knows, perhaps he could learn one of these talents. After his body calmed down, Ronin next spent a couple of hours lifting weights, then entered the biorinser. He made a call to Uncle Nagata. Ronin? Ah, it's good that you've called. I'm just about to finish up, his uncle began. The older man was dressed in nothing but a long bohemian robe and some underwear. Seemed he'd been in the middle of something. Ronin arched a brow in amusement. I'm not interrupting, am I? I should be the one asking you that. What are you doing? You're literally stark naked, Nagata replied. Ronin cursed to himself. He was still in the middle of the chemical shower and had forgotten to switch off his implant's holographic projection. His image was more akin to a simulation of a person than what a mirror would show. But it still knew the difference between naked and clothed. Touché. So how's the company website? He quickly asked, changing the subject. It's up and running, but there's still a lot of work to do if you want it looking properly. You really should hire some more people. I'm an old man, and you're working me to the bone here. Worst of all, I'm not even getting paid for this. Having only begun to set up a website a week ago, Ronin had been late. A website was crucial if he wanted to sell the Omnibolt, and any respectable company would have already had a site ready. But this was all new to him. He'd never been in charge or done business like this. Fortunately, he just happened to have an uncle who was an expert. Yeah, sorry about that. I will hire some people later, Ronin said. Nagata nodded but kept quiet, the silence stretching as the older man became more serious. To think it's finally over, Nagata eventually said. You mean the conflict with Spectre? It was not the first time his uncle had brought this up, Yeah, I really thought, well, never mind. It's over now. I almost died, Ronin said after a slight pause. To think that one man, or rather alien, would be more dangerous than the entire organization backing him. He shook his head, then continued. Many things have happened since my contact with that artifact, but if there's one thing I regret, it's taking that breathing mask from Klep Tulsi. To think one of the people I decided to protect to make up for that is now dead. And it's because of me. Nagata's expression became conflicted. Remember to hold on to that feeling, he said. Never forget it. It's what makes us who we are. Use what you're feeling right now to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. Although Nagata was acting a little strange, Ronin gave a nod in agreement. What his uncle had said made sense. And put on some damn clothes the next time you call. People will think you're some sort of pervert if you call people looking like that. Ronin ended the call before Nagata could finish. Some things were better left unsaid, or in this case, unheard. He next put on some clothes, then noticed he had an unread message from Hurricane. He opened it, then shot up in horror. What? Hurricane had not only taken the liberty to sign up for a race in District 87 with the Omnibolt today, but he'd also told the organizers of that race that Maximus Solutions would begin to sell this ship after the race was over. Ronin went into panic mode. This was too soon. They needed a promotional video. Heck, their ship wasn't even ready yet. Damn you, Hurricane! He grumbled through gritted teeth. He immediately called Simons. There were only a few hours left before the race was set to start, meaning there was no time to cancel. They had to work fast. Hurricane would showcase the Omnibolt regardless of what they did, so they sort of had to show up. At least the Daredevil had convinced the organizers to give them some time to speak after the race, but things were not looking good. A few hours later, 2 designers and 1 security guard arrived at the racing venue. The 3 hastily exited the Heidenreich, then jogged towards the packed street. There were thousands of people here. This place was fairly deep into the valley of District 87, but it still looked markedly more fancy compared to the earlier venue. People wore more expensive clothes here, and the streets were wider. Ronin felt a chill in the air. In spite of the large crowd, with the planet approaching winter, it was really starting to get cold. As they entered the crowd, Simons and Dimitri snuck off to one of the stalls selling Kiboris, leaving Ronin to deal with their troublesome new test pilot. He looked around, his tall frame letting him easily spot the Omnibolt and the redhead beside it. "Speed Demon!" Ronin shouted over the music. "Mr. Maximus!" "Took you long enough? Get over here." Hurricane laughed back, seemingly having no idea of what he'd just done. As the crowd surrounding Hurricane parted, the 2 clasped hands. "You bastard! Why did you sign up like that without telling us?" Ronin hissed as he drew in close. "Whoa! Hold on there. Isn't this a good thing?" "I was helping you guys," Hurricane replied as he backed away. "We haven't fixed any of the problems you mentioned. Why didn't you come by the factory first? We could have at least fixed the noise issue." "Relax, the ship's working fine. Besides, don't you want to see how it holds up in a race?" Ronin shook his head. This guy was hopeless. "Well, it's already done now anyways," he sighed. "Just don't do anything like this again in the future, all right?" As Hurricane nodded, Ronin couldn't help but ask, "By the way, how did it feel? I've heard that the xenofuel drive changes everything. It's quite the beast you've made." Hurricane said, his voice excited. And as for the engine, let's just say that whatever the fusion drive can give you, Xenofuel takes that to a whole new level. You know, when I really started to accelerate and the dampeners began to fail, the whole ship started shaking, and there was this loud, deep sound. It almost felt like the engine was alive and was trying to break out of the ship. Heck, I nearly passed out. What went through your head when you decided to make this ship? That's why we need a test pilot, Ronin said. And we did warn you about the inertial dampeners. Hurricane made a weak shrug. Yeah, I know. Before they had the chance to talk more, large hollow screens began to descend along the skyscrapers. Next, the announcer for the race began to talk, and Ronin noticed Hurricane starting to get antsy. He figured that was his cue to leave. I guess our time is up. Good luck out there. I will be watching from the sidelines, Ronin finished, then made for one of the Kibori stalls. As he met up with Simons, the bulging man tried to hide the insect-covered stick he'd been eating. He failed. In fact, he was so bad at hiding the stick, and his act was so obvious, anyone bothering to look would have noticed. Shut it, Simon said, noticing Ronin's gaze. Ronin held up his hands defensively. Wasn't going to say anything. It's good food. The announcer next started to hype up the crowd, building up more excitement as he called out the contestants. The rising anticipation turned the atmosphere electric, and by the time the last contestant was called out, people had begun to shout and chant. It was time. Are you ready? The announcer shouted over the speakers. Several hands went up in the air, and the crowd roared back. 3, 2, 1, go! Drive plumes scorched the street as the ships took off. One ship, however, was not quite like the others. Boom! A loud sonic boom sounded out as the ship broke the sound barrier, and several people in the crowd ducked down as they covered their ears. Ronin face-palmed. Damnation! Simon simply continued to eat his stick of kibori, but his face now looked grim. On the massive holoscreens, they could see the Omnibolt quickly taking the lead, which was good, of course. But there was an issue. The oncoming traffic. At this speed, the noise the ship made and the wind pressure it generated caused windows to break and shuttles to swerve. The people the ship passed fled as they covered their ears, and many screamed in terror. Soon, a planetary guard siren rang out. Ronin, who'd previously only been embarrassed, began to turn pale. He looked over at his hairless colleague, his voice now shaky. Simons, we might need to modify our sales pitch a little. Chapter 45. Tribunal 1. The Omnibolt, now with 3 triagonal ships in tow, thundered ahead along the streets. The single planetary guard siren had now become several, but it did not seem to help. The Omnibolt only pulled further and further ahead of the law enforcement ships as time passed. Fortunately, Hurricane had veered off the racing track once the chase began, so at least he wouldn't be leading the guard here. A holoscreen showed the pursuit until Hurricane eventually cut the feed off, his fate unknown. Ronin doubted they'd catch him, though. Not him. Not in that ship. The race continued on, one of the Vantablack ships replacing the Omnibolt as the lead. It struggled a bit with keeping said lead, but as the race finished up, that black ship eventually became the winner. Hurricane was still nowhere to be seen. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up to Slopnar and his ship, the Black Velvet, the announcer shouted. The guy called Slopnar raised his hands and cheered in victory, but the audience didn't seem enthused. Some claps rang out, and a few people gave a half-hearted, yeah. But beyond that, number. They all knew who the real winner was. The announcer spoke a little more, then left the stage a few minutes later. "All right, I guess it's my time now," Ronin thought, then headed for the speaker's podium. Earlier on the website, he'd separated the Omnibolt into two models, the ones with infused frames and the ones without. But after Hurricane's display today, he was going to need a third option. He climbed up on the overhang, linked up his implant to the audio system, then began his performance. "Ahem, everyone! Slopnar indeed did a fine job at beating out the competition, but I think we all know who the real winner is. Let's give it up for Speed Demon." The speakers amplified his voice across the venue, and people began to clap, though there was also some that booed. All things considered, it's not too bad, Ronin thought. The obnoxiously loud ship had terrorized half the district. At this point, he'd take any applause he could get. He continued, "As many of you might have noticed, Speed Demon was driving a bit of a different ship today." "A bloody loud one, yes!" someone from the audience shouted. "A loud one indeed," Ronin agreed. "But also a bloody fast one. You guys all saw the speed of that thing. He even escaped the planetary guard. What do you think a ship like that would normally cost? 200,000 credits. Maybe you're lucky and get a used ship with those specifications for 150,000. But what do you think the Omnibolt Extreme costs?" He paused, allowing for the anticipation to build. Then he erupted. "No, we here at Maximus Solutions believe that the customer always comes first. For a mere 90,000 credits, you can drive the same ship as Speed Demon. And if you don't want to make yourself known, say, if you're faint of heart, a little bit cowardly maybe, just say you want the quiet version of the ship when you place an order on our site. We'll happily send you that version as well. I would also like to assure you that the quiet edition of the Omnibolt makes close to no noise, costs exactly the same, and is just as fast as the Brave edition." Now that got some reactions. Ronin could hear some people whistling, whereas others widened their eyes in surprise. They'd taken the bait, and now it was time to reel them in. With a shark-like grin, he spread his arms wide, then gestured towards the crowd. "If you're short on credits, however, we have the standard edition of the Omnibolt available for half the price. That's 45,000 credits for one of the fastest ships around. It can't reach the speeds that the premium editions can, but it's not far away." Ronin next lowered his voice, sounding like a man about to reveal a deep secret. "We'd also like to add that every ship is specifically built to be easily modified. You could add whatever you want onto it, and with that, I mean whatever. It's so easy to do, even a baby could do it." A promotional video of Hurricane's Premium Edition Omnibolt next began to play across one of the massive holoscreens. It showed the interior of the ship and went into detail on what could be modified. It also displayed anything from acceleration graphs to turn velocity data, fully showcasing the Omnibolt's strengths. Ronin stayed upon the overhang, and after the video finished, he took questions from the audience. Some asked about ship modifications, others about the performance of the standard edition. Most, however, wanted to know about the silent version of the Omnibolt, the one that didn't exist. Having come up with the idea during the race, Ronin struggled a bit to come up with satisfying answers. Hopefully nobody caught on to what he was doing. After his time was up, the questioning ended, and he descended from the podium. "So, a silent edition?" Simons asked, having walked over a few minutes earlier. "Ugh," Ronin grunted back. Something had to be done. Simons furrowed his brows. I guess things will get pretty busy in the next few days. Though, that being said, why did you offer the unfinished Omnibolt as an option at all? Nobody would buy a ship that loud, and you even called it the Brave Edition. Ronin was about to respond, but just as he opened his mouth, he heard a ping. A message? He nudged his implant. This is a notification from the company website. Could it be? He opened the link, and there it was. An order for the standard model of the Omnibolt. Ronin had just sold his first ship, just like that. Subtracting the 10,000 credits the raw materials would cost. That left them with 35,000 credits in net profit for less than a day's work. Ronin looked over at Simons. Evidently, he'd received the same message. Unable to speak, the two just stared at each other. With how ill-prepared they'd been for this product launch, neither had expected for someone to buy a ship this early. Seemingly, the low price and the ship's modular design had paid off more than expected. Ping. There was another order. The standard model again. Ping. Another. It didn't stop. More and more orders began to come in. Ronin's face stretched into a foolish smile, and as he looked over at Simons, he saw the same smile on him. How many at their age had done something like this before? There couldn't have been many. With this, he was not only one step closer to becoming a successful designer, he was one step closer to leaving Ironglades. I don't think working overtime is going to be enough anymore, said Simons, so excited he was shaking at this point. Ronin replied, his entire body rocking back and forth as he nodded. We're going to have to hire a lot more people now. You know, we might even need more factories. The two watched the website with rapt attention, celebrating each time a new order came in. They'd now received a whole 7 orders, each one requesting a silent version of the Omnibolt. Ping. Another message. To Ronin's surprise, though, it wasn't a new order this time. He brought the message up with his implant, and his heart jumped. The hospital? As he began to read, the exhilaration from the product launch only grew. Scrabby's awake, he muttered aloud. He couldn't believe it. Just when he thought the day couldn't get any better. What was that? Scrabby? Simons broke in, leaning over. I need to go, Ronin said, turning around to leave. There was no way he'd let the kid spend his first day awake alone. Not after that experience. As he began to walk, however, a hand firmly gripped his shoulder. Not without me, Simon said. This is a great day, and we're celebrating, be it here or, ow, hang on. The big guy began sliding across the ground as Ronin walked, not affected by the man's grip at all. Having to release his hold before his arm gave out, Simons transitioned into a brisk pace to keep up. This is a personal matter, Ronin said with implication. Scrabby's that child we met at the Happy Pearl restaurant, right? I know. Come on, let's go. Ronin thought about it for a moment, before he eventually gave in. All right, if you want to follow, you can, but keep what you see to yourself. The two walked up to the Heidenreich, entered, then headed for the hospital, leaving guard Captain Dmitri behind. As the ship arrived before the hospital, something seemed off to Ronin. He'd been here before, and this place was usually packed with people. Now, though, there was barely anyone around, and the people he did see looked frightened. As they entered the building, things became even stranger. The closer the two got to Scrabby, the less people they saw, and those they did see quickly scurried away the moment the two closed in. They walked for about 5 minutes more, then arrived at the last corridor before Scrabby's room. There was not a single soul around now. Everyone was gone. It was almost as if this entire section of the hospital had been abandoned. "Is this really normal?" asked Simons, his voice echoing across the hall. Ronin slowly shook his head as his eyes turned vigilant. "No, it is most definitely not." They walked up to the door leading to Scrabby's room, and Ronin, now cautious, carefully slid it open. First, he spotted the medical equipment. Contained within the sterile white room, the dozens of long tubes that had previously gone into Scrabby's body hung loosely down upon the bed, the large circulation machine they connected to having been turned off. Then, he saw Scrabby. The little kid was awake, but he could barely stand. There were also bandages all over his tiny body. Ronin let out a breath in relief. It seemed the hospital had done a good job in taking care of the boy. Finally, he saw the man beside Scrabby. Dressed in a decorated black and yellow uniform, the older man held a stiff posture as he talked silently with the child. He had a thick gray beard, sharp eyebrows, and a powerful physique. The man next turned towards Ronin, his weathered face morose and his eyes hard. "So, you've actually decided to come," he growled. "I would have thought the father and mother would have been enough for you, but it seems you want the child as well." Ronin had a feeling he'd missed something. That black and yellow uniform was what the planetary guard wore. And why had he said those words? Also, why would the planetary guard come here for a slum rat like Scrabby? The answer was, they wouldn't. This man was here for him. "Who are you, and why are you really here?" Ronin demanded. "I am the one who's been cleaning up your mess. Tens of thousands of people have died because of the ruddles you released upon this city. Someone like you shouldn't have the right to know. But in consideration of the one you've brought along..." The man gave a respectful nod towards Simons. "It's an honor, sir." "Just answer the question," Simons said. The older man sighed. "I'm Sima Hui of the Planetary Guard, and I'm here to inform you, Ronin Maximus, that you've been summoned for a tribunal." Ronin's implant notified him of an incoming message, and as he pulled it up, then began to read, the gravity of his situation became clear. "Citizen of Tar, Ronin Maximus, you have hereby been summoned for a tribunal to answer for your crimes against the people of Concordia." On the document, there were signatures from the Planetary Guard Marshal, the Mayor, the Minister of Education. Heck, even the Prime Minister had signed it. Just then, Scrabby spoke up with tears in his eyes. "Ronin, is it true? Did you really kill my father?"